Welcome to episode number 2 of the Sizzle football podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about one solo team. The team I'm going to open up with today is the Chicago Bears. And just for further information, I'm going to do a different team, every couple of days, right? And I'll just start with solo teams. It'll be about 18 to 20 minute podcast. So I'm going to start with the Chicago Bears today. So let me just mention one more thing before I start. So this is obviously the second episode of the football podcast. You can find the Instagram for this podcast. It's separate. It's a separate Instagram from my basketball one. It's just Sizzle football, and then it will be on the same YouTube, which is Sizzle podcast. It's the same YouTube channel. The link is in the bio. So everything is there. The link is in the bio, and let me get it started. So with the Chicago Bears, this is a really interesting team because this is the team the last couple of years that, hasn't really had a franchise quarterback, and now they believe, and I think so too, they get their franchise quarterback with Justin Fields. They were able to trade it with a couple teams and make some maneuvers to be able to move up and get Justin Fields, which is a huge thing because this is a team that wanted a quarterback going into this draft, but had a pick. Originally they were around 17, I want to say, or 20. Something around there. They were around there, and, they felt where they were exactly that they were too late to get one of the quarterbacks, and they were. They were too late to get one of the four main quarterbacks, whether it was Fields or Mac Jones or Trey Lance, Wilson, or Trevor Lawrence, right? Sorry, one of the five quarterbacks. So, with that being said, I think with them being so far back, they wanted to kind of move up in this draft so they could go and get a quarterback because they know the rest of their team, other than their quarterback spot, is honestly pretty good. I mean, they made the playoffs last year with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. That's pretty impressive, honestly, to think about it because, we know Trubisky's really not a great quarterback. So, the fact that they go out and get a guy like Justin Fields who's extremely accurate, who's very athletic and fits the play style of today's quarterbacks, so he can get outside the pocket, right? And it seems like he's a great leader. He's going to fit this team perfectly in this city perfectly too. So this takes Chicago, in my opinion, from a team that, you look at and you say, maybe they sneak into the playoffs, maybe they just miss it, to a team that can now build something really special. Now you see Allen Robinson wants to stay. I believe he signed an extension with this team. So now Allen Robinson wants to stay. There was talks about him leaving for the whole year, and now he wants to stay. You still have Anthony Miller, who I think will break out this year now that he has a quarterback. A lot of people thought he would break out last year, but I think he'll break out this year now that he has a quarterback. You have Darnell Mooney, who I'm a huge fan of. I'll get to him more in a second, but you have enough receivers around you. You have a good offensive line for Fields, and with David Montgomery and then Tariq Cohen can catch passes in the backfield. He was a little hurt last year, so he'll be fully back healthy this year. And, you have solid coaching, in my opinion. You have a great defense. You have a great front seven. And, the secondary's good as well. Obviously we know they lost Kyle Fuller in the secondary. That's going to end up being a pretty hefty loss for this team. That's a loss that this team obviously, wanted to avoid if they could have, but they weren't able to avoid it. They ended up getting rid of him, I think, because of money situations, right? He's in Denver now. He'll be a guy who will really help Denver, right? So that will help. But really for Chicago, the main guy that you have for this team is you have Jalen Johnson, right? And I think his potential is higher than Fuller, and that's part of the reason why I think they got rid of Fuller. They still have Desmond Trufant, who's pretty solid still. Maybe you move in a different direction after this year and get another young corner. But, as I mentioned, they have Jalen Johnson, and we'll talk about him for a quick second. He is a great one-on-one, man coverage guy. He's physical. He's a guy who, won a lot of matchups last year at such a young age. He was a rookie last year. He'll be going into his second year. So, for a guy like Jalen Johnson, I think, it's important for him to keep developing, and that will really help this team develop on the defensive end of the field, in my opinion. So, yeah, I mean, Jalen Johnson, obviously out of Utah, he's a great player, and, he's going to continue to be a great player for this team for a long time, and he'll be kind of a staple that they lean on in this defense. Not only him, there's other guys, but he'll be one of the main staples they lean on with this defense to help this defense, continue to grow and to get better. Obviously, at the safety spot, you have, in my opinion, maybe the most underrated player in football. You have Eddie Jackson, who I'm a huge fan of. He has end-to-end speed, right? Receiver-type speed, unreal in coverage. He covers every play. He can intercept balls. He has great hands. He's a solid tackler. He does everything really at a high level, and he's one of the, top 3 safeties in football, in my opinion. So he's obviously a guy who, this is the guy in the secondary this team really kind of builds around. So that's why, when I talk about Jalen Johnson, it's important for him to keep developing because he'll only help, other people's games, whether it's Eddie Jackson or Tashawn Gibson, who's another one of the more underrated players in the league, who's great. So, it's just about all these guys in the secondary to continue to develop. But, Eddie Jackson is a guy who is obviously there. He's a superstar player. In my opinion, he's one of the top 3 safeties, as I mentioned, in my opinion, in the league. Not just one of the top 3 free safeties. I think he's one of the top 3 free and strong safeties, in my opinion. Just one of the top 3 safeties, in general. Very underrated, very slept on. Just a guy who's going to give it your all every single night for this team. He had a couple weak games this past year, but, injuries were lingering at times and other issues. But still, overall, even in those weak games, he was still better than 96% of safeties in the league in a bad game. So, you imagine when he's playing at his best, and we know he will next year. Because he showed some of it this past year, but obviously the year before that showed a ton of it. So, yeah, and the year before that as well. But, with Eddie Jackson, it's just, he's already at that top level. Now it's can he become the best safety in football? And I think by the end of this year he can. I really do. So I think that's the goal for him. Become the best safety in football. That will only really help this team moving forward, in my opinion. So, I talked about the front 7. You have Akeem Hicks, unreal defensive tackle. I'm just going to really mention, the big guys that everyone would know, and then I'll go over the smaller guys. You have Roquan Smith, very good, very underrated, good coverage guy. Can get to the quarterback pretty well. You have Danny Trevathan. He's getting a little older, right? But I think what you have to realize about Danny Trevathan is he's a veteran. He's in this locker room right now, and, being in this locker room, Danny Trevathan really helps this team kind of, mold and his defense kind of come together, and he kind of can bring out a veteran leadership type of direction for this defense because it's a very young defense, and he's, one of the veterans on the team. And then, of course, you have Khalil Mack. I don't think I need to really say much there. I think most people know what Khalil Mack can do. And then, you have Robert Quinn, right? He's getting a little older, too. He's another one of the vets along with Danny Trevathan, but he can still perform at a high level along with Danny Trevathan, right? So, obviously, this is going to be one of the top defenses in the league as they pretty much have in the last 3 or 4 years. So really, like I said, with the whole quarterback thing the last couple of years, that's kind of really what it came down to. Because as I talked to you just about the defense, and I'll go a little more into that later on, towards the end of the podcast. But this is one of the top defenses. You have one of the best front 7s of football. In my opinion, top 3. The only other teams that I think really could say they have a better front 7 would be Washington. In my opinion, probably has a better front 7. Maybe not though. That's one team that can make an argument. Washington's front 7 is really deadly. And then you also have the front 7 in San Francisco too. So, other than that, Chicago is right there with them. So, one of the top 3 front 7s of football. You have a solid secondary. Could use a little more, pieces, I guess you could say. Right, would be the right word for that. A couple more pieces. But, yeah, Jalen Johnson continues to develop. He'll be one of the better corners in the league in a year or two. Eddie Jackson with Tashawn Gibson, that's solid there. You could use one more good corner. I don't know how much left Desmond Trufant has. So, but even if he doesn't have that much left, he's still productive for another year or two, at least in this league, if not more. So, yeah, great defense. And now let's go to the offense really quick. Obviously go out and get Justin Fields. He's supposed to be looked at as a franchise quarterback. If everything molds into place and everything is able to, go into place for the Bears, and Justin Fields ends up being a franchise quarterback, this is a team that will make the playoffs and will take over that division. They'll take over the NFC North, and they'll become the team to beat in the NFC North for the next 5, 6, if not more years. Minnesota's future looks a little bleak. They have some young guys. They need more defensively. They have good receivers. I don't know about Kirk Cousins, right? Running game's good. Offensive line could use a little more work. Green Bay, obviously we don't know the whole situation with Rodgers, but let's say Rodgers does stay. How many more years Rodgers have left in the tank? Maybe 2? So you got to think of that too. Maybe Chicago's not ready to win right this minute, but at least if not this year, at least the year after. I still think they make the playoffs this year. But if they don't get it going this year, at least the year after, in my opinion, right? You got Allen Robinson, right? He's still relatively young. You have Anthony Miller. You have Darnell Mooney, as I talked about earlier. He's going to be one of the future slot receivers in this league, in my opinion. Very underrated. If you haven't checked him out yet, go check him out. Super quick. He's got the swagger. Great route runner. He's got good hands. He can do a little bit of everything. So he's a guy who will continue to develop for this team and just continue to get better. So he's a guy that I look at and I say, okay, you have those 3 receivers. If you're Justin Fields, that looks pretty good to me, in my opinion. And of course, you have Jimmy Graham at tight end, who is obviously getting a little older, getting towards the end of his career, but you have a very solid backup in Cole Kmet, who, in my opinion, has some potential. I think he went for about 300 yards last year, but, it's a pretty good blocking tight end. His hands need a little work, but, he's got long reach. He can get out, the balls that some guys may not, be able to reach and defend. He's got, good enough speed at this level, to compete at that tight end spot. So, if Cole Kmet ends up, developing, and I think he will, that's another bonus for Justin Fields, another guy for Justin Fields to be able to sling the ball to. Because like I said, you don't know how much longer Jimmy Graham has, but hopefully, Fields can use Jimmy Graham for the next year at least, or maybe 2, and just be able to, use the last couple of years of Jimmy Graham's career, because I think Jimmy Graham is still pretty solid, but obviously Cole Kmet is the guy that I think Chicago's looking at the tight end spot and saying that's the guy we want there eventually, full time. So going to be interesting there at that position too. But I'm going to talk about Anthony Miller really quick before going to Allen Robinson. Anthony Miller is a guy who I think last year a lot of people expected to break out, and he didn't. But I honestly think that was really because of the quarterback play. You had Foles and Trubisky coming in and out, and just it's tough for receivers who are young and just trying to develop their game. It's different for a guy like Allen Robinson, who has been in the league for a while now, and he's played with a lot of bad quarterbacks. He kind of gets used to it. A guy like Anthony Miller, he's so young still. It's kind of tough for him to kind of, get used to playing with a quarterback and not at a high level. And now you bring in a high-level quarterback like Justin Fields, and I think it will only take Anthony Miller's game to the next level. So, yeah, if I'm the Bears, I'm not giving up on Anthony Miller yet. I'm giving him another 2 years at least, especially 1. And I think you'll see him turn into a really good number 2 receiver who can go for 1,000 yards this year, in my opinion. I think you'll have Allen Robinson above 1,000. You'll have Anthony Miller. I think, like I said, I think he'll be at 1,000. I think you'll have Darnell Mooney at about 800 in the slot, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but around the 700 to 900 range, right? So, I mean, this is a great team for Justin Fields to come to, in my opinion. A lot of people keep talking about the situation, right? The situation, whether it's the coaching or the team, right? I mean, I think you have a good enough offensive line already. I think Matt Nagy is a pretty solid coach. I think he's getting a lot of hate for no reason. I think really he is a pretty good coach. I mean, look what he did with Trubisky that 1 year. They went to the the 1 year they lost to the Saints in the first round. Or not the Saints, I'm so sorry, the Eagles. Because then the Eagles went on and lost to the Saints. But obviously that was a team I think we can all agree that they were better than the Eagles. They lost on a Cody Parkey missed 30-yard field goal that never should have been missed in a million years. That team did everything perfect that whole game to beat that Eagles team. If you watch the game, they could have played a million times. The Bears would have won 90% of those matchups. The Bears were a much better team. They're a much better team. Much better coached. Quarterback situation might not have been as good, but they're a much better coach, had a much better defense, and much better offense. So, no disrespect to the Eagles, but it's just like you look at that and you see what Matt Nagy was able to do with that team. Now imagine you put a good quarterback in his hands like Justin Fields, and you can imagine what he can do. So I think Fields is going into a good situation. You're going into a great city. An organization that's been a little shaky in the last couple of years, yes, no doubt, but has gotten better, has taken steps to get better. The draft picks have been better, other than Trubisky, right? But overall, the draft picks have been better. You go in, you get a number 1 receiver, one of the top 10 receivers in football. You get a solid number 2. You get a really solid slot receiver, 2 good tight ends. You get a good O-line. You get a good running game with David Montgomery. Let me talk about him really quick. David Montgomery is another one of the guys, in my opinion, in the league who's one of the most underrated players in the league, and I expect him to have a huge year this year. Because I don't think they're going to air it out with Fields a ton. I think they're going to air it out a good amount, but they're not going to air it out 24/7. Because if they air it out 24/7 with a rookie quarterback, he could run into some issues. As good as I think Fields will be in his rookie year, you don't want to air it out 30 times a game. So you give it to a guy like, David Montgomery, who is a big touchdown threat. He's a big body. He can break tackles. It's hard to bring him down. He went for over 1,000 yards last year. Averages around 4.5 a carry. That's huge. I mean, he can get yards on a carry, right? He can average good yards on a carry. He can get the ball in the end zone. He can really help Fields and take pressure off Fields in certain situations. So, and then you put Tariq Cohen in there in the backfield on third down catching balls. That's really big too. So, no, I mean, I think Justin Fields, in my opinion, is coming into a great situation. I don't know why I keep hearing bad situation. I think it's a good situation for Fields to come into. I mean, you got to think, you look at the situation in Jacksonville, right? They're a young team. They're still rebuilding, but they have no defense. They have a couple guys, their secondary is very weak. You got C.J. Henderson, who I think will develop into a pretty solid player, right? You got Josh Allen in the front 7 and so on and so forth, right? But you look at Jacksonville and you see where they are as a team, right? DJ Chark is not anywhere near the level of Allen Robinson, right? So you just have to look at this team in Jacksonville and say, okay, Jacksonville, and no disrespect, DJ Chark's great, very underrated, but you have to look at this Jacksonville team and say, okay, they're not anywhere near the situation that Chicago is in terms of their team in the future and now. Neither are the Jets. The only team that has a better situation than the Bears is the 49ers. That's about it. And it's not by that much. It's not by as much as you think. Right? The 49ers have a great future, but they just have to stay healthy. George Kittle gets hurt too much. As great as he is, he's an unreal player, but he gets hurt too much. Deebo Samuel showing a little injury proneness in the beginning of his career. Offensive line can't really stay healthy. The running game stays healthy for the most part, which is good. The defense can't really stay healthy. So, you just have to be able to hope that 49ers team can stay healthy, and obviously that would be the best situation that any of the 5 quarterbacks went to. But, no, Fields went to the second best situation, and it's a solid situation. If Fields has a solid rookie year, he should be able to lead this team to the playoffs if everything goes right and everyone stays healthy. You're coached pretty well. You have a good offensive line to protect you, good running game. You have good weapons to throw to, and you have a good defense, a great defense, actually. One of the top 5 defenses in football. So, yeah, if everything falls into place for this Bears team, obviously this is a team that, with Justin Fields there, this is a team that should really be a playoff team, in my opinion. And like I said, they will take the division over, in my opinion, if Fields ends up being great for the next 5-6 years. Yeah, it might not be this year, like I said earlier, but after this, they'll obviously, in my opinion, take the division over. Because like we said, I don't know what's going to happen with Rodgers. Detroit's kind of like, I don't really know what Detroit has a long way to go in terms of rebuild. They have a ton of positions and holes to fill. They're a long way away from even the rebuild process. In my opinion, Detroit's like 2 or 3 years away from even being within 2 or 3 games of the playoffs. So, and then you go look at Minnesota, who's a team that's kind of shaky. They could either be really good this year or be really bad. So, you don't know what they're going to do. Last year they were kind of close to the playoffs, but overall I don't think they were a good team last year, really. They would have got killed in the playoffs by anyone that was in the NFC. So, and then you go Green Bay. Yeah, Green Bay has a lot of young talent around them, but if Jordan Love doesn't end up being a good quarterback, and they end up getting rid of Rodgers and Love's not that good, they're going to need to get another quarterback. So, and even if Love ends up being good, it's still going to take him time. With that team, he doesn't have a good number 2 receiver. Defense is solid, for sure. Offensive line is good, right? But, still without no number 2 receiver, and a running game that's kind of in and out. Most of the time it's strong, but it's kind of in and out. Some games it looks good, some games it looks bad. Jordan Love's going to have a lot of pressure on him, coming in and kind of being this, the next guy to Aaron Rodgers, be like, okay, you're the next guy that has to take over for Aaron Rodgers. So, look, Jordan Love may have just as good as a team around him as Justin Fields, but I trust in Justin Fields a lot more than I do in Jordan Love. So that's why I think if the Packers get rid of Rodgers, this is the Bears division for a long time. So, it's going to be interesting to see too, just to see how some of these guys in Chicago develop, knowing that they have a quarterback now. I know their fan base is happy. I know the city's happy. I don't blame them, It's the first time they've had a quarterback, franchise-type quarterback in a long, long time. So, yeah, you looked at the last couple of years, the only piece I was really missing for Chicago was a quarterback, So, now that they go and they get that quarterback, you wonder what they can be with that quarterback. So, I'm excited to see Justin Fields. He's my favorite quarterback in this draft class. One of my favorite players. So, yeah, it's just going to be really exciting. And I think Chicago's turning over a new leaf. I think now they're ready to win. They're done finishing 8-8, 7-9, 9-7. They're ready to turn over a new leaf and start winning games. So, yeah, this is a team I think this year that goes I predicted, I saw their schedule. I think they go 10-7 because there's one extra game this year just in case, you guys didn't know. 10-7 will put them in the playoffs. I think Green Bay will probably, with Rodgers, I think Green Bay loses 4 or 5 games with Rodgers. Without Rodgers, which I think will be the case, that's what I'm kind of betting on here. I think they win not lose, they win. Because I said with Rodgers, they'll lose 4 or 5 games. Now, if they don't have Rodgers, I think they'll win maybe 5 or 6 games without Rodgers. That's about it. So, this division will be Green Bay's. And, you might see a sort of trend if Aaron Rodgers leaves Green Bay, where guys like Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones, guys like that may request trades. As crazy as that sounds, they may. So, because they may not see as much in the future of Green Bay as other people see if Rodgers leaves. Because, you got to understand, if Green Bay gets something decent back for Rodgers, they get a good number 2 receiver back, okay, you're talking now with Jordan Love. But if you just get back a couple draft picks, which seems like all they'll get back, not that those aren't valuable, you're going to need to wait a couple years to probably for those guys to develop, right? Unless they're, unreal receivers that are just coming right out of college. But the way Green Bay drafts, they might not even draft a receiver for Jordan Love. But let's say they do. If they draft a receiver for Jordan Love, then, okay, you have Jordan Love a number 2 receiver, and you have everything else around him, so now it's just on Jordan Love. But if they don't draft the number 2 receiver, then Jordan Love's just going to be throwing to Devontae Adams the whole time like Rodgers was, and Jordan Love's not that good. So if Rodgers is getting 11, 12 wins with this team, cut those wins in half for Jordan Love, in my opinion. So look how many wins you're at now. So, it's just, it's going to be interesting because this is the division that's very interesting. I think Minnesota and Chicago have the best futures in this division. No, let me reframe that. If Jordan Love ends up being a good quarterback, I think Green Bay and Chicago are the futures of this division. But I think even if Jordan Love ends up being good, it's still Chicago. I like Fields over Jordan Love. And, that's just my opinion. And I think much younger team in Chicago, I think the defense will hold up a little better along the years. Even though Green Bay's defense is very underrated, I just think the defense in Chicago, the front seven's better. Secondary in Green Bay may be better. I think it is probably better. But I just think, if guys like Jalen Johnson and those kind of guys keep developing, Chicago secondary will be better than Green Bay's in like a year or two, and obviously their front seven's better too. So, and then offensively, if Jordan Love's throwing to Devontae Adams the whole time, who's his number 2? So, Chicago's got a better running game in my opinion. Montgomery's going to be better than Aaron Jones very soon in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, I hate to talk about Green Bay so much, but I got to bring them up because of this whole Aaron Rodgers thing, and because of the whole thing with Chicago, obviously in their division, and that's the team that's going to be going head to head with them for the next couple of years, and that's the team that I think will take them over in that division. So, yeah, I mean, big season coming up for Chicago. Big season for Fields. I wonder if they'll start him right away or not. Obviously they have Andy Dalton, and they talked about putting Andy Dalton in the first couple of weeks, but then I've heard some reports recently that Justin Fields looks unreal in practice, and he looks like he's already a QB1, which is crazy this early. So, in my opinion, I think they start Fields by week like 2 or 3. I think they'll give Andy Dalton 1 week, and just for Fields to kind of look at him for 1 or 2 weeks, definitely 1 or 2 weeks, and then just to say, hey, Fields, you're ready to go. Go out there week 2, week 3, and see what you can give this team. So, yeah, 10-7 this year for the Bears, in my opinion, playoff spot. If Rodgers leaves, they win the division. If Rodgers doesn't, they lose the division. They finish in second, but they still make the playoffs either way. So, yeah, I mean, going to be interesting to see what this team is able to do with the franchise quarterback now, something they haven't had in a while. So, yeah, going to be a fun team to watch this year, and going to be a tough team. They got a great defense. They have good young pieces for Justin Fields, so I think Fields is really happy where he's at in Chicago, and I think he's out to prove people wrong that he fell so far in the draft because he should have been picked much earlier, in my opinion. So that's going to wrap it up for episode number 2 of the Sizzle Football Podcast on the Chicago Bears. Make sure you tune into the Instagram, check out the post, make sure you subscribe and give it a like on the YouTube channel, and hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast.